Focus. I am looking for a way to be more attentive to my life, a lens that is not a note on my phone, not an unachievable list of that which can't be attained, not a fleeting image formed by light and pixels. For my lens, I will select a word that has staying power, that has resonance. This summer is full of disturbing news from the streets of our nation to the streets of the Middle East for me today. To sort out the wheat from the chaff, my word is focus. Luminous. Since my earliest teenage years, I've had a practice of walking at night. How many miles have I covered in the years since I adopted this practice, which I have done by myself with one exception through all these decades? As a child growing up in New Jersey, night's veneer gave the houses a magical quality that ordinary daylight completely obliterated. And in my 2+ decades in the southeast of the United States, the rural dark made the stars so brilliant that it almost didn't matter that I had to be careful not to step on the copperheads that would come out at night to lay on the warm roads. It almost didn't matter. Wait, that's the reason for the word. To focus me today, let me look for all things luminous. Resilience. My word for today is resilience, because sometimes you have to remind yourself what you're made of and that the world is biased towards life. Every part of us wants to keep on living, and that's what every system in our body is trained to do. After a difficult stretch, when you have that time to sit back and look and consider, comfort can be found in the knowledge of your own resilience. Shimmer. Water shimmers, and yet so does a mirage. In this summer of drought, I am conscious of the ways that shimmering happens. I'm conscious of how precious each drop is as I carry it bucketful by bucketful to my plants from my bathtub. The redwoods are suffering, and half the azaleas are gone, and even some of the succulents are starting to look a little peaked. The world is crying out. Summer for me is the time to try out new practices, new ways of being more fully in my own life. For this summer, I have resolved to pick a word a day as a lens. The poet, Elizabeth Alexander of Yale University, said in her poem, "Praise Song for the Day," we encounter each other in words spiny or smooth, whispered or declaimed, words to consider or reconsider, words that shimmer. Alexander says, we crave truth tellers. There's so much baloney in the world. She says we need to get back to simpler things, easier things. Children are drawn to language that shimmers, she says. They will stop you and ask you to repeat a shimmery word. When you think of it, even the biggest stories, the boldest statements, the most brilliant proclamations are just all made out of words. So we should choose them with care. And this morning, I'm offering a sampling from my summer's collection. In the spaces in between, consider what words would name the days of your past months. Focus. Good thing words are recyclable, because I need to use this one again. It is very hard to focus on the fact that my father is dying. I find myself wanting to concentrate on 100 other small details. To be present to this is a larger challenge than I would have imagined. And while it helps that I've companioned death many times before, of course, this time is different. I'm trying to hold myself within this challenge. And this word a day, it's helping me to do that, to be present and be real with what's happening. That's very important to me. This time of losing my father will never come again. And whatever knowledge is wedged between the stress and the sadness and the pain, I want to know and not wake up at the end of my life and realize that I failed to be present to its truth. I sit on the plane, responding to the call to come because the end seems near, trying to think of who it was I quoted in a sermon recently who said, "What if we think of death just as an extension of life? I want to look at this whole grief journey with honesty, intention, and courage. Perhaps I will dedicate this flock of summer words to my father to be sure that I am able to bring his last days into focus." Interconnection. Grief reminds me of interconnection, for all griefs are bound up together like loomed weaving or a tapestry, and a pull in one part of the fabric shifts the design of the whole piece. We can't grieve one part and not grieve the entirety of all that we have known and lost. Call me odd, but I find a beauty in this, because it's an invitation into a deeper presence where we can catch our breath and know our spirit. For me, this one simple fact that we are interconnected sings of life and love and the enormity of the stars and how all of life keeps renewing itself in so many ways. So as I begin to grapple with this news about my father, I'm also somehow in the presence of lovers gone by and of my beloved grandparents and friends and aunts and the other dear ones whom I have lost. All of this is with me. And those who have called me minister, who truly allowed me to walk with them through those last days of life, well, that bond has nothing to do with whether you're paid or not to do the work. All these beloveds are with me now, and after 10 years of ministry, I can count their numbers in the high double digits. When I drive around Walnut Creek or Pleasant Hill or Concord, Martinez, I remember this person or that person, or visiting this one in their home. There's a smile, a laugh, a word. Such great comfort to know myself to be so tied in, so interconnected. Knowledge. My father put a lot of stock in knowing things and respecting people that he thought were knowledgeable. Book learning was not the only form he valued. If you were an accomplished carpenter or a well-studied mechanic or a skilled hairdresser, he valued you as well. And yet all these kinds of knowledge, from how to recover from a crash in your stock portfolio, which he did with advanced cognitive loss, to how to judge a Japanese antique, to how to conduct a scientific experiment, all began to slip away from him in these last years. In truth, we didn't really notice it because he remained smart in so many ways. His vocabulary was almost not diminished even to the end, and only the most difficult of medications would take away a few of his words. He was renowned for being able to count backwards from 100 by sevens. When asked to do this as part of the mini mental status test, he would lift his chin and with a fiery scorn, as he would recite the numbers, 100, 93, 86, 79. What the test would reveal was that while he had many facts, he had in fact lost the ability to have knowledge, that quality of putting facts together in a way to make greater sense out of them. And still, over the last years on red-eye flights to see him when I couldn't sleep, I would try to count down from 100 by 7s and 8s. And despite the fact that I'm generally considered pretty coherent, I couldn't do it with nearly as much grace as my father, so maybe he retained a kind of knowledge. Bitterness. In what may be one of our final true conversations, my father asks us to carry on our work to make things better for people of all races. He's clearly reliving the memories of being in the internment camps for Japanese Americans during World War II. This is very striking for me in this summer of Black Lives Matter, which I have to watch from a distance because of his dying. It's also notable because it's not something he ever spoke about, really, in his living life. Despite all the material and success he had managed, some part of him was always afraid. And those fears have been with him in these last days, and that is what my sister and I are really here to counter. The taste of the thickened water that they give him to reduce his choking has reminded him of the almost impotable water he had to drink in the camp. He carried so much shame that it's only at the end, when he's letting go of everything, that he can even tell us this. He can even express this pain. Those who believe that the harm done by race and hate and racism is easily mitigated should be in this room with us now. No small child at the age of 4, as he was, should have had to encounter that, and no person in their dying days should be tortured by wondering if they're worthy of respect. This is a lasting bitterness, and I take the word today because it is my job now to remember the taste for him. Poet Elizabeth Alexander, who wrote out her own grief at the sudden loss of her husband, recalled a Bill T. Jones dance, The Last Night on Earth, which he choreographed and developed after his partner died of AIDS. In the dance, Jones asked these questions from the stage. What time is it? Can you look in the mirror at this very moment and be okay with it? Are you doing what you are doing right? Have you located your passion as if this were your last night on earth? Precious. Seeing Liam on the field with hundreds of other drum corps members, looking at how strong and, well, tall he's grown, hearing the music whose dynamics are outpaced only by the swell of my mother's heart, life continues. For my father, music was the most precious thing, and that memory is with me. Even when he was reduced to being able to do very little, music gave him joy. My amazing sister arranged to have his piano teacher, and he took lessons up to the week before he died, come on his last Saturday. And when she showed up, he clapped his hands and asked if she had brought him his present. My father, who might just have had perfect pitch, hummed along in tune as she played the grand piano outside his room, and he rested in this small island of contentment in the great storm of unrest. It was beyond words. As I sit in the dark on this night in a sound cloud of brass playing, the strength and the fragility of life seem very precious. Community. My summer is nearly over. A few more days of study leave and I'll be back in full. It's been an odd summer, and I'm still half living in that world where we walk when we take our loved ones to the edge of death and bid them farewell. The caring words of friends from across my life have swept me away from the deep water's edge to the land of the living, though I'm still making time to walk on those sands and gaze into the water. I treasure all those words which come on cards and texts and emails and Facebook and phone. Ruth Eddings' song, All of Me, has been played here twice this weekend, the first time in a memorial service for Helen DeMann when Scott Schrader played it. Helen died the same day as my father. In a world of superficiality, isn't this what we want? For someone to be able to say they knew all of us, they knew us true? Elizabeth Alexander asks, are we not of interest to one another? Do we not call to one another? Do we not want to know each other? Do we not reach across the void towards other human beings? If I am here and present, it is a wondrous thing. And if I let the tears come before and after the memorial services I've had to do this summer, then they are less likely to create technical difficulties during the service. And if one or two steps out, it's okay, because that's what we do in community. Today, I ask you to ask yourself, What opens your heart? What makes your mind sing? What gives you joy? And what is the lens that can make you see that more truly? How can you give that lens a name? How can you gift it with a word that shimmers? Try it sometime. Take a word and let it be your guide for the day. And I'm going to give you one more from my collection, and that word is love. It's one of the strongest words in our language. It's strong enough to overcome everything, even division, even loss, even death. And I won't say much more because we all know what this has meant to us, and you can use it as the lens for your own life. Love, we say together, is the doctrine of this church, and service is its prayer. So may love be a guide for us as a community this year, for our nation, and for our world. And if I am to be guided by one word, let it be love.